Here we are, Streams of Light podcast. Chris Anthony with you here. Beautiful Monday afternoon here in San Juan Capistrano, podcasting live from Revelation Studios, and always excited about a new discussion, a new conversation to have. Today we're going to be looking at a cool subject. As the music plays in the background, because we're going to kind of talk about musicians today. Well, not really musicians. We're going to talk about prophets and poets. Actually, it's poets, prophets, and musicians. And this is something that I just love, because it was about a year or two ago that I was listening to some old 60s music, and I realized, these guys, these musicians were like prophets. We're going to get to that in a second. I just, before we get started, I forgot I wanted to talk about something that I read this morning. Interesting news. Goldfish. I don't know if you guys saw the story. There's a town somewhere in, I think it's in maybe the Great Lakes area, Michigan or something like that. Let's see, where is that from? Near Minneapolis. And you got some people who have pet goldfish. Yeah, we've all had some pet fish at some point in our life, right? And so pet goldfish that have been released into a local lake because someone just, they didn't want to throw the fish out, flush it down the toilet or anything like that. So what did they do? They put it into the lake in Burnsville. And these things have multiplied, and they have gotten big. So they're kind of like taking over the lake. I mean, it's not like a horror movie. It's not like, those, what do they call those flesh eating? I want to say piranha, but that's it. That's energy, right? Someone tell me on chat, what do they call those flesh eating fish? But anyways, these goldfish are not doing that, but they are kind of causing trouble in the lake. Not that they're biting people or anything like that. They're upturning, like there's grass on the bottom of the lake, and they're like pulling that up, and they're taking over the population. They're just kind of messing up the ecosystem. So I thought it was kind of funny. Well, not too funny, but interesting story. So that's a lesson learned. Don't throw your goldfish into the lake. And another interesting story I came across was for those of you who've lived long enough to know about gaming in the 90s, and I'm sure there's plenty of gamers out there who weren't around in the 90s or were too young to play or whatever, but they still know about Super Mario. Today, I saw in the news that Super Mario 64, a copy of the 1996 game, it was still sealed, and it sold for $1.56 million, breaking the world record, which was just set like 2 days before. So it's kind of crazy to think about perceived value. It's like, okay, that's worth a lot of money to someone. And I don't know if they're thinking about just playing it. Is it worth that much money? I think it's more of an investment, right? They're going to hang on to it and then sell it 10 years down the road for 5 times as much. So that's interesting news for the day. Just kind of stood out to me. But anyways, back to the poets and prophets and musicians thing. For me, I've always been fascinated by musicians and poets. If you look at guys like Rumi or Hafiz, or as he's sometimes referred to as Hafiz, the Sufi poets, at one point in time, they said Rumi was the most famous poet in the United States, which I found very interesting, being that he was a Sufi mystic and beloved by a lot of Americans. And so you got the poets, and they're always saying stuff in poetic prose that just breaks through these mind barriers, right? And it speaks truth. So you got the poets, and then you got the prophets, and those guys have a tough gig, because no one really likes someone who stands in the middle of a crowd on a soapbox and points a finger. But then you've got the musicians, which, if you think about it, musicians have been around, not only just have been around forever, but the musicians filling this role of speaking forth truth and being light bearers, it's been around for a long time. That's what the whole Old Testament and the book of Psalms was about. These people that were speaking things about the truth, about the current day. But you fast forward to, let's just go back to the 60s. fast forward in time all the way up to the 1960s, and you have all these hippies who were trippers, day trippers, right? And, this is the realization I had. This was a couple of years back. I was sitting there with a friend and we were listening to we were just kind of going through a 60s and 70s stage, just get a cup of coffee and just put on some classic music. I don't know if you guys remember Bread. If anyone remembers Bread, they're kind of a cool band. And you listen to some of these songs from these guys, these hippies from the 60s and 70s. And I started to kind of like freak out a little bit because I knew the lyrics ever since I was a kid, but there was something about what they were saying that just really, I don't know, it was just like a lot deeper than when I heard it. I knew the tune, I knew the words, but then when I really thought about it, I thought, wow, like Neil Young, for example, he sings in that famous song, Old Man, Take a Look at My Life. In the beginning, he says, I'm a lot like you were. So in the beginning of the song, he's saying, hey, old man, take a look at my life. I'm a lot like you were, young, inexperienced, whatever, in need of a relationship or whatever, things, youthful men are all about, making money and so on and so forth. And here's this old man. But at the end of the song, he kind of truncates that message. And he says, old man, look at my life. I'm a lot like you. He says, I'm a lot like you. And then he says, I need someone to love me the whole day through. One look in my eyes and you can tell that's true. But that's, so, and then there's Cats in the Cradle. Everyone talks about that. It's about the dad who just didn't have time for, his kid. And then his kid got older and successful. And then his dad wanted to spend time with him. He just gave him the same line back that, his dad gave him, So truth being spoke. And then in the modern day, of course, yes, I have this playlist I made up and I added a song I'm not one who listens to Taylor Swift a lot, although I like her music, but I added one of her songs in and I was listening to the other day. And what did she say that stood out to me? Man, it stood out to me. She said, hell was the journey, but it brought me to heaven. I listened to that and I thought, wow, that's pretty deep. Hell was the journey, but it brought me to heaven. And that's like, how many people, at a young age, I mean, I don't know if she wrote those words. I don't know how many people she has helping her with songs. I don't know if she's the only one who writes the tune or if she has lyricists or what, but that's a pretty deep statement. And it just goes to show you that truth is no respecter of persons. If you go through a difficult time, you can yield the rewards at a very young age. And that's a powerful statement. Hell was the journey, but it brought me heaven. Because even in a perfect world, we always think about this, right? In a perfect world, there would be no suffering. That's why when we talk about the other world or the world to come, or we say heaven or whatever, in the astral world or whatever, there's no suffering there. Even, the ancient scriptures always talk about in that place, there'll be no tears and so on and so forth and no pain. And again, in the arts, this time shifting gears from radio and music to film. It was the great older classic film. It's older now. I mean, I used to think of this as not an old film, but now it's pretty old. It's The Horse Whisperer, Robert Redford, an older film. And what did he say? He said, I once saw the greatest beauty emerge through terrible tragedy. And again, I read an author once, Sundar Singh, and what did he say? He said, I once saw a pile of manure, and out of that pile of crap was growing the most beautiful flowers. And it's interesting how that type of, that type or that illustration of, here you have something that's fertilizer, it's crap, it stinks. And out of that grows the most beautiful plant that, to me, and think about it, people all across the world today, all across the world are picking flowers, putting them on their little tables or in their vases. But, for the spiritual seekers, a lot of them who meditate and so on and so forth, they will put flowers on their little altar where they can, why? Because when they look at it, what are they seeing? And what are they smelling? It's like heaven, right? It's like, it's no wonder that it's not only gals, but it's mostly gals, right? All you gals are really into flowers. And you got to admit, the the floral scents are very, I don't want to say intoxicating, but they can be when you're thinking about that otherworldliness, that other place. Matter of fact, if you're a spiritual seeker and you have sought the path of meditation, and in your path of meditation, if you're doing a more energetic path, you will start to notice at certain times that you will smell scents. These scents will be very floral, but they're different. And what I've learned over time is this is most likely the energy powering through different energy vortexes, different chakras. And so that heavenly scent, and people putting flowers, they're putting flowers on their altars or on their tables or in vases, and they have sacred texts, they have scriptures, and they have pictures to remind them of whatever it is that they think of as beauty in life, or a teacher or a leader or son of God, whatever it is, to remind them of beauty. And they put flowers there because out of these difficult times can come the most beautiful awakenings and realizations. The musicians, the poets, the prophets, the musicians, teaching us through the music. If you're willing to listen, Taylor Swift saying, "Hell was the journey, but it brought me heaven." It's just amazing. And I think about it. Sometimes I think, okay, check this out. Sometimes I think that the other world, if you can say that, because I think it's so integrated, it's not really, but if we need to look at it like that, just because we're focused on the physical senses and what our eyes see and what our ears hear, although we know outside of those spectrums, outside of the visible spectrum that our eyes see, cats see more things than we see. That's why they look above you all the time and they watch things and you go, where's the gnat? Where's the bug? And there's nothing you can see. And that's times they look at you and they know, they see your auras change or whatever, and they come up to you and they know. There's things beyond our vision that just because we can't see something in our visible spectrum doesn't mean that something else doesn't exist. And just because we can't hear something in our audible spectrum of hearing doesn't mean that there's not something else out there. So, sidetracking there, hoping I can find my way back to the main path. But these things, they're there. And we do whatever we need to do to remind us of these things that are outside of our own sensory perceptions. And outside of our own sensory perceptions are realities. And these realities are oftentimes just amazing. Just amazing. So this recognition that, like Neil Young had, that we are all the same, that we're really essentially all the same. It's something that different teachers throughout time have noticed, that they have tapped into what they would call a universal or a universal consciousness, or what sometimes referred to as omniscient consciousness or omnipotent consciousness. So it's all knowing and all powerful consciousness. And so sometimes we call that the unitive field. So this is something we can tap into. And then we realize, when we see that, then we realize how the awareness and the consciousness, even though we have our own personalities, that the awareness or the consciousness that is in me is also the same awareness or consciousness that you have, that all consciousness is just really one consciousness, but we have different personalities, and we're in different bodies. So when we look around, we think, wow, okay, I'm Chris, you're so-and-so. And so we tend to look at ourselves as completely and separate and different just because we're a spiritual being having a bodily experience. But in reality, the body is not our essence. The essence within us is the soul, its soul consciousness, its soul awareness. And so we're all of the same, we're all the same origin. We're all the same being. We're all the same light. So interesting to me that sometimes going back to, the poets and the prophets and the musicians, it's interesting to me that these people have played a quite unique role in history, because if there's any one thing I've learned about truth, for example, like what is truth? Truth is that which can be perceived by the mind, but a lot of times truth, we don't always want to look at the truth. That's why some people will say things like, you're living in denial, or you can't accept the truth. I mean, these are obviously, I don't want to trigger anyone, but these are comments that people usually say in interpersonal relationships and dialogues. But the reality is, there's so many things out there for us to see, but sometimes we need help. So these people come in, like the poets, like Rumi or Hafiz, like the prophets, like a Richard Rohr or a Eckhart Tolle, or the musicians, even like a Taylor Swift or a Neil Young. And they come in, and what do? They speak about things that sometimes we know deep down inside, but we haven't quite yet seen the light. And it also causes us to grapple with reality. So sometimes we have to look, at the very real challenge of the fact that we don't always want to see what's truth. For example, someone might say, well, if you were honest with yourself then, and that's a pretty powerful statement. And the truth is we know deep down inside, we know all things. So sometimes we're not honest with ourselves. So these people play a great role in our life. I'm just excited about thinking about particularly musicians, because musicians are, I wouldn't say they're on the fringe, but, they're considered, how even people in the 70s and the 60s looked at the barefoot hippies. They thought, man, these people are a bunch of losers. But in reality, the message they were giving made them, it kind of reminds me of for those of you who studied, different world religions or scriptures or anything, it kind of reminds me of the same drama that was going on in some of these scriptures. Like, there's all these people who are like, yeah, well, we're the chosen. And then these people come in who are like totally not status quo. They're walking around barefoot, and maybe they don't bathe that much. I remember in the 70s, and seeing gals with, hair under their arms, and that was, kind of shocking to society, right? So these people come in with all these, they're breaking all these social mores and values and everything. Yeah, but they come in and they're just there speaking truth, and they're writing catchy songs. And what happens? Your mind, you think about it. You might think that you don't have the best memory, but if I start playing a tune for you, it's amazing how words come back, isn't it? Like words come back. So here they are in the 60s and 70s. It just cracks me up, going against the grain, against the establishment of the day, and they're just speaking truth. And they've kind of programmed us in what sense? That they've taught us these words through lyrics. And granted, not all of them are sacred words, obviously not. But, and some of them can be quite annoying, to be honest with you. But at the same time, I marvel at the fact that divinity and beauty is to be found everywhere, not just within sacred walls and temples and places, but that there is a divine song going on throughout the world, and it's an interplay, and it's not just music. It could be anywhere you go. It could be anyone you run into. It could be just someone who looks at you and smiles, or holds a door open for you, or lets you in when you're stuck in traffic and you can't seem to get in when you're trying to, make an entry point. It's just, the truth is, if you look for it, that's a saying, look for it. And if you look for it, you'll see it. If you seek it, you'll find it. If you ask for it, you'll be answered. I just love that. So what I'm going to do is we're going to take a quick break. And if you would like to chime in on the live stream on the podcast, if you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and send me a chat and we'll get you on. We'll be back in just a minute. Streams of Light podcast. Chris Anthony back with you. So we were looking at the subject of kind of light bearing, the role of the poet, the prophet, the musician. And I've got my good friend Terrence on the line with us, and we're going to just kind of talk a little bit about, there's another interesting element to life that we were just talking about on the break with Terrence. By the way, Terrence, welcome. Thanks for coming back to Streams of Light podcast. Yes, you're coming in loud and clear. So one of the things that Terrence and I were talking about on the break, because we were talking about, we do talk a lot about, relationships and working on yourself and so on and so forth. But one of the things that we were talking about was how life is kind of like a puzzle. And, if you look at life as a game, usually with games, you got one side is kind of against another. And right. Yeah. So a lot of times in a game, there's a winner and a loser. And I think that is kind of, a lot of times we look at life like it's a game, and that makes it a little bit more of an egocentric way because, like I'm better, you lost, I win. And, you got to think about it. Think about life. If you just turn on sports, that's reinforced. And not that sports are wrong or anything like that, right? But it's fun. Yeah. Okay. Let's see here. Oh, you know what? Thanks for, okay, you know what? I'm going back. Okay, thanks for that. Steph was chatting with me. Thanks, Steph. I did push the wrong button there, Terrence. And so now she'll be able to hear you. But for a second there, I forgot to unmute you. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, so we were talking about how life is more of a puzzle than it is a game. So, I don't know. We were talking about sports, sports. It's like, basketball games, hockey games, whatever, winners, losers, you got McGregor, you've got all these guys, right? And we're in that mode, but it's not a game. It's more of a puzzle, I think.
Right. It definitely is. Yeah. Yeah. To me, I've always felt that way. Like, we come here and we start off with like one little puzzle piece, and we don't really know until, we go through life a little bit, and then we're like, wait, I got something right here. And then we desire to expand off of that. But I think like, like being on this earth with other people and, the different systems that men has created, we get caught in that, and we start thinking more in terms of, like as if it's a game. Like I need to win, even if they lose. I still need to win and get mine. And we forget about that puzzle piece that we first receive. We start off with,
right?
And then it's like, going through the lessons and life experiences to go back to that original piece, and then we get there and we're like, I've been doing this for so long, trying to, fight my way through everything, making war with everybody, and it hasn't worked. I need to try something different.
Right.
And then that puzzle mindset starts to, come in. And it's like, you know what? I have something to work with. I don't have to war and fight against these other people and try to win over them. I have something right here, right now I can work with, and I can expand off of that.
Right. Yeah, I love that because, when I think about just life in general, I think about how, there's this flow going on, and sometimes we're not aware of it when we're trapped kind of more in that mindset, or the egocentric mindset. And, there's this flow in life. And when you figure out it's not me against them, or I'm the victim, or whatever that kind of, mentality is, once you get out of that, you realize, because think about it, everything is trying to get better for the most part in life. Agriculture is trying to grow and bear fruit and give and so on and so forth. So when we have the other mindset where it's like a game, win or lose, I need to win, or I need to take, or I need to, be pleased in all these areas, or whatever mentality comes along with that. we're kind of going against the flow of nature, the flow of creation, if you will. And so
Exactly.
and you know, we were talking when we talked about in the break, you know, puzzles don't really have losers. You know, you're kind of stuck if you don't solve it, but really the designer of the puzzle wants the player to figure it out, right? I mean, that's the
Yeah.
idea. You design a puzzle and, you know, it's not a war, it's a
No,
mystery.
not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. Yeah. It's a fun mystery. It's like it's you know it's fun. You know, it's not like going at war and yeah, just like yeah, it's a mystery. And everybody has the puzzle given to them. It's not just certain kinds of people. We all have that.
Right. Right. So here's the thing. The subject today is, as I said, it's the poets, it's the prophets, it's the musicians, but this is actually, I kind of, you know, as I was talking about this is film. So this comes from film, this concept that we're just talking about here. This comes from, I don't know, you know, Terrence, if you've seen it, but it was a Netflix series called The OA. And
Okay.
in the OA, this is you know, it's kind of a complex you know, bingeable, you know, Netflix show, but in the OA, this is what they say: it's not a game, it's a puzzle. A game is one side
Wow.
against another. There's a winner, there's a losers. Puzzles don't have losers. As I said, you're stuck if you don't solve it. The designer wants the player to figure it out. It's not a war, it's a mystery. At a certain point, now this is interesting, at a certain point, the puzzle goes IRL. And then they say, what's IRL? In real life. So this is it's kind of a mind-bending series because
Wow.
in the series, these people are all addicted to this game, okay? And so
They're,
this game
they're
is,
addicted to it?
they're addicted to this game they're playing. It's this puzzle, you know, well, it's not a game. Yeah, we got to make sure we delineate. Okay, so because that's why they said
Yeah,
it's not a game, it's a puzzle. So it's a puzzle, but it's like they're on these handhelds. It's almost like when you would see someone gaming. All these people are
yeah.
addicted to this puzzle thing.
Yeah.
And but what ends up happening, and so they're all going to different places and trying to do these things and trying to get to the next level of the puzzle.
Yeah.
And so what happens in this series is they're saying at a
So
certain,
so
what's that?
so are they supposed to work as a team to solve the puzzle?
You know, it's not necessarily that they're supposed to, but like anything else in life, I mean, you know, you probably already know the answer. If you're just working on your own because you want to win or like, you know, solve the puzzle before everyone else, you know,
Uh-huh.
you're going to have a harder time than when you work together. And so
Right, right.
in this series, definitely people are working together. And as a matter of fact, there's these captives in one of the, you know, in several of the episodes who they have to come up with an amazing amount of teamwork because
Wow.
they're held captive by this guy and they have to get out of there. But anyway, so in the quote, you know, they say there's a certain point that this puzzle goes IRL. What's IRL? It's in real life. And it's kind of a mind-bending thing because what starts out is just like a little console gaming puzzle thing turns into
Uh,
like real life. But I think in a
yeah.
way, you know, it's a pretty cool illustration of what we can learn.
Uh-huh. Wow, that's really interesting.
And so like working on yourself, that's an interesting, you know, we talked about that a little bit on the break. So, you know, sometimes we go through seasons where, you know, we're really busy. We're busy with family, friends, kids, relationships, whatever. But then we go through these
Right.
seasons where we're more solitary or we just have more time, you know, and I think a lot of people the last year of, you know, either they were stuck with their family or they were stuck without. So the people that were stuck without their family had to be okay being by themselves, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Were you by yourself a lot?
Um, on and off. I was living in my grandma's house, but her and her husband they both worked. He had his own business, but so I'm most of the time I have the house to myself.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so that's like, I mean, one of the things that I did during the last year and a half when there was just a lot of uncertainty and there was all the lockdowns going, I did get outside and get a lot of sunshine and exercise. But one of the things I did was I spent my time, my solitary time going deeper into meditation and exploring, you know, like what can I learn, you know, in my own, you know, prayer closet, so to speak. And
Uh-huh.
I think that's invaluable.
Yeah.
that kind of approach, that's part of the puzzle. Solving the puzzle is, going through just, learning to be okay by yourself. Also learning to tap. Well, we all have this beautiful, infinite energy, within us, and beautiful knowledge base within us.
Mhm.
And it's like, we have to tap that though,
Yeah.
to see things from a different perspective.
Right. Like with that right there, that you just said, like tapping into that within us, because that happens to me a lot when I drive, like I'm on the road, and like it's not something I intentionally try to do, but like I just drive, and it's like whatever's in me, it just all comes out, and is like the most amazing feeling, and it doesn't come from the outside, it's right here inside of me, and um and yeah, and it's like the more that I go inward and more I learn about myself, and the more I learn how to take care of me, it the feeling is there more often, and it's more intense, not in a bad way, but it's just like a well that just coming up.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I feel like this has been really important because I kind of feel like, it's interesting when you step back and look at humanity in different times and seasons. I feel like there were a lot of people that were just going through the motions of life, eating, drinking, sleeping, working. And I feel like this has been an interesting season in that, like you said, you feel like this well on the inside, and I mean, I felt the same thing. And I think what that taught me was that I had to tap that well, and I had to learn how to tap it and tap it good. In other words, to tap the
Uh-huh.
well of self-sufficiency and self-care, self-love, all that, because in reality, what kind of person can you be to someone else if you haven't necessarily tapped that well I think you really need to learn how to do that, because otherwise I think there's
Yeah.
just been a lot of people living in codependency, like I just want to
Yeah.
be around someone just because I can't
Definitely.
be alone.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard that a lot, actually. Um, I don't know if it's kind of like a newer thing, but um, I don't know. It just I've never like resonated with that. I've always kind of been like the quiet boy in the corner, just smiling, just to smile. And everybody's like, how are you happy and you're by yourself? I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
And I didn't know until like I got into my early 20s, and then it started to make more sense what people were talking about.
Right.
Yeah, and I think like with the whole like self-sufficiency and learning about yourself, this whole self thing, I think like society likes to shun that. It makes it seem like it's a bad thing, but um I don't know. Like I've spent most of the days and years of my life by myself. So I do have like a big sense of self, and it's worked good for me. And I think too many people just want to just believe whatever everybody else says,
Right.
and just go by that, and they miss out on something that, like, they have a choice. They can just try it, like, just spend more time alone by yourself, and whether you get anxious, or you know things that happened in the past come up, or you feel happy, like, spend more time with yourself, just try it out, and then they start realizing, oh, this is actually not too bad. And like, actually today I was thinking, like, if you don't have if you don't have yourself, you don't have anything. Like, your whole experience of life is like projecting from within you. And I know it's hard for people to find that balance, because they think their whole life is whatever's on the outside, money, or family, or relationship. But there's a whole world inside of us.
Right.
Yeah.
It seems like that part of us that immaterial part of us or whatever you want to call it. It seems like that's what it seems like that's the true riches. Like, for example, we've heard people say, well, money doesn't solve problems or you can't buy love or whatever. But if you've ever really stopped and consider it, I mean, people who are very wealthy, who have a lot of money, they're not necessarily the most happy people on earth, right? And
Right.
as a matter of fact, one thing I've noticed is sometimes the more money they get, the more stressed out they get, because it's like, you know, now you have to have attorneys and you have to have like, you know, your own like financial planners, and you have all these headaches. I'm not saying that everyone who has money is miserable, but
Right.
we have to be honest with ourselves. You know, money doesn't necessarily buy you happiness. It can't even buy you. I mean, you can get good medical care, I guess, if you have a lot of money, but at the same time, you can't save your life. You know, if you have something like terminal or whatever, it doesn't necessarily save your life. But here's the thing: what's inside you and what's inside me, if we tap it, we're talking about tapping the well, everyone, right now. If anyone just tuned in, tapping the well. This is pretty deep stuff, no pun intended. If you tap that well, there is a creative force within your own being that is so powerful and creative. And that's what I think is neat about the season we've been through, because if we tap that well, now we're looking at more creativity. We're looking at more inner peace that comes not so much just because, you know, I got the raise or whatever, although that can help. I'm not saying money's an evil thing. I'm just saying that, you know, it can't buy you the peace and the bliss that ultimately comes from the inside. And even the person, you know, that has a terminal illness, who's rich, they might do all the most, you know, how would you say it? Just like the most progressive experimental therapies. But at the same time, there are chemicals within your own body and being that are so powerful. And this is something that for those who like read Joe Dispenza, for example, would realize, like there's things within you that are so powerful that money can't buy you that. But tapping it, well, let's be honest, Terrence. I mean, tapping it can be kind of difficult. What are some of the, you know, if you could look back and go, here were the pitfalls on my path on tapping that well. Can you think of anything that maybe hindered you along the way, that if you could do it again, or if you could come along and coach someone a little younger, what you might, you know, what kind of advice you would give them?
I wouldn't change anything at all, to be honest.
Well, not for you,
Would you for someone else?
so what kept you? I mean, because, okay, let me just give you an example in my life. Like for me, I think laziness was one of the things that was a pitfall for me. I mean, I certainly wouldn't change anything in my journey, because our journey is beautiful and it's sacred, but I get that. But I guess, you know,
Right.
sometimes just in this day and age, it's really easy just to be scattered energetically and be like always looking at something on our phone, or there's so many things to do, you know,
Right.
and those things, you know, as fun as they may be and entertaining, I just think that, you know, for me, I need to marshal my energies daily to really tap that, you know, and to not,
Wow.
that's just my own experience, you know, my own personal
Yeah. I
experience.
I I guess I don't know. I guess because I mean, like my childhood, I always felt that. I didn't know what it was. I thought everybody was feeling that. I didn't know until I got older. But um, I guess I would like just around like toxic people, or people who kind of kept that well from wanting to come out, and like just going through like school and family. But like being young, you kind of have to stay around your family or adults, whoever, or if you're in school. But maybe I could like took more time to go out in nature, or um, especially like at school, because I used to get really exhausted just being in school and around other children. And I didn't know how that was affecting me. I and like I could have just probably, while I was at school, tried to maybe in between classes just go outside and like go under a tree or something, have some time to myself.
Yeah. That's a huge one. What you're talking about here is, you know, there's two facets to it. One is just, making the effort to be by yourself. But the thing that stood out to me is like being in nature, because I've heard a lot of people talk about how they feel like nature is a very it's a very contemplative environment in the sense, like if you can still your mind and just like stare at the
Yeah.
trees or, the clouds or whatever, you kind of like, do you ever just go, what the heck, man, look at this place. Do you ever feel like that?
Yeah. I was one of those kids. Like I remember, the teachers used to bother me a lot because I'd like when I did go to recess, like I'd be by myself. I'd try to find like some bushes or trees, and like I'd be there looking at the bugs and insects, and and I actually still have a lot of pictures from when I was little and like climbing trees and stuff. And yeah, I've always felt that connection to nature. And when I was little, because I mean, like you're young, you just kind of feel like or think everyone else is like that. And I didn't see it at first, but I just started to realize like how come like the other kids they don't really want to go out in the woods and try to climb a tree or something. And I don't know, like that. I guess that's what made me kind of more want to be by myself. And I did like try to get some of the other kids to be like more into nature, like hey, let's go look at some bugs or insects or chase after a squirrel or something. And they're like, what? Like, no.
Yeah. It's just, I studied, you know, for years I studied, more formally, spirituality and whatnot. And one of the things I learned was there was a big pattern in spirituality as far as mystical experiences, that a lot of people had mystical experiences when they were in nature. And it didn't really matter, what kind of faith background you were from. And, if you were Catholic, like the kids were out, the shepherds were out and they saw, an apparition
Uh-huh.
of the Virgin Mary or whatever. And, the Protestant pastors had
Oh yeah.
huge mystical, Jonathan Edwards, in the United States had a huge mystical experience out in nature. And it just goes on and on and on. And, all the spiritual masters talking about, like Jesus talking about, consider the birds of the air or the flowers of the field. I mean, these are the things
Yeah.
where it's a contemplative environment. I think the biggest thing for me, my realization in nature that really changed my life, was seeing this divine expression through nature, like seeing the wind on the trees, like I mentioned before. Or today I was walking and these two butterflies were like just like flying all around me, and I was kind of busy because I had things to do. Like I got things to do, but then something
Yeah.
inside me was like, this is like a miracle what's happening right here. It's just like there's this
Uh-huh.
there's this song and this dance of creation, and it's like
Oh yeah.
it's pretty powerful. I mean, it's not so powerful when you're really in your head or you're busy or this or that, but when you don't have any like huge dialogue going on and you're just kind of absorbing it in that kind of neutral mind state, it can be
Uh-huh.
pretty amazing. You feel like it's, for me, I felt like it's fed me like a spiritual food, so to speak. Like I felt stronger
Yeah.
after I saw nature
Yeah.
in that way.
And like nature has like it has an awareness of its own that's something you just kind of don't get in the city.
Right.
And yeah, like you feel like nature is it's aware of you, and it's inviting you into its home,
Yeah.
you know.
It's interesting. They call it Mother Nature, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I mean,
You'd be surprised. There's a lot of like masculine energy in nature as well. A lot of action and movement. It's like um I don't know how to say it. It's kind of like um like having a spiritual mother and father taking care of you when you go out in nature.
yeah, I always, and there's, I know these guys are considered, more new agey, but there's a group of people who focus on Gaia, and that's the kind of the term for Mother Earth. But some people think
Uh-huh.
that like Gaia is like, like almost like a living entity in that sense, like,
Oh
and
yeah.
and I kind of actually like that because, like I think she's a little bit, upset with us right now, like because we've kind of trashed things a little bit too much, and
Yeah.
literally throwing trash in the ocean and plastics and things like
Yeah.
that. But I don't want to get into all. It's a terrible thing, and people's awareness needs to be raised up to that. But really, if you look at the planet like it's a living entity,
Mm-hmm.
And that it's really like, Mother Earth, like think about it, like everything we need, be it water, sunshine, sustenance and the food, it all comes from Earth, and it's all given. If you think about it, I remember this great little story. I quoted this writer just before you came on the show, and it was like, I'll quote him again because it was Sundar Singh, a great writer, and he said, be like the tree. And he told this story about this tree and these kids. You know how kids can get when they get together, like especially young boys, they get sticks in their
Yeah.
hands or whatever. Well, these kids came up to this tree, and here in this beautiful older tree was all this fruit and so on and so forth. And they came up with their sticks, and they were just, as kids do, as little boys do when they get naughty, they just start whacking the tree and breaking branches
Uh-oh.
and hitting the fruit and so on and so forth. But he goes on to tell the story, and he says, he uses that analogy as an analogy in life. He said, when people cross you or abuse, or you're abusive to you or whatever, it doesn't mean you can't stand up for yourself. But he goes, be like, but remember, don't forget the tree, because no matter what those kids did to the tree, all it did was in kindness and goodness just offered its fruit for their sustenance. And I think about that. I think that's so powerful, because if you look at nature, it's like unconditionally. I mean, Jesus
Yeah.
talked about it. He goes, the sun shines on the crops of the good people and the bad people, and
Oh yeah.
the rains fall on the crops of the good people and the bad people. In other words,
Yeah.
nature is very unconditional loving,
Yeah.
and
Definitely.
even the traumas, that happen in nature, be it, a lot of the storms, or tragedies, these are things that, also seem to be not so much related to, that just happens. But that's a whole nother episode, a whole nother thing. I think I will say this, I think we've created a lot of it, not only from our behavior, but I also think that collective energy can, you think about it. Terrence, I was thinking this morning, and you might have saw some of the posts that I put on Quora, but, if you think about thoughts as energy, they're literally waveforms of energy. Thoughts are powerful. If you get collective
Yeah.
people that are angry or worried or this or that, I really wonder what that does in the realm of Earth. I mean, I wonder how many things are created through collective energies of,
Yeah. Yeah.
we don't think of that. We always think, oh man, nature's, she's brutal, and she can't. I mean, the ocean's a powerful thing. I learned that from being a surfer. You want to respect, nature, but
Right.
I wonder sometimes what we bring on ourselves, not only from the way we've maybe not been so environmental friendly. That's a whole nother issue. But what have we
Uh-huh.
brought on ourselves energetically through the way we
Yeah.
are? It's just kind
And
of
how that affects other people as well.
yeah.
And then that's the collective energy. And then they feel it and pick it up, and then they wonder why, like, well, why they're having a rough day, or why they feel angry or mad, upset for some reason, and then it just goes from one person to another. Then they go home, and then their family feels it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons why I've kind of found the path in the East a little bit more interesting, not that I've abandoned everything I learned in Western, spirituality, but one of the reasons why I found the path in the East interesting is because if you think about thoughts as energy, as waveforms, like a wave, if you've ever seen energy on a I don't know what they call them, spectrometer, I can't remember what you call them, but if you've ever seen like waves of energy, on a,
Mhm.
live, it's pretty powerful. So if thoughts are energy, the big question is, like you're talking about, okay, if we're having a bad day, that not only affects us and our bodies, but it affects the people around us. But if we
Yep.
could delve into how to control our own energy, I mean, being a master, I mean, a lot of people think about, well, I want to be a master because I want to, do great things. But really, if we could be a master of our own selves, I mean, if you think about it,
Mm.
how many masters have never been talked about or spoken of or written things? How many people who've lived and died and then learned how to master their own body but got no praise? I mean, really, the
Right.
reward of a master is in the fruit of his or her own life,
Yeah.
And if we can learn how to control our energy and to marshal it into positive things, because if you think of life as like a lake, and every thought you have is like, if you toss a rock in that lake, there's like this circular like wave that shoots out from where the rock hit, right? And so that's like
Uh-huh.
every action we do, every thought and every action is like sending out waves. And so
Yeah.
I think just wanted to say that if we can think about how we can become masters of our own selves, then we're in sync with what? With nature, with God, or spirituality, the masters, whatever you want to call it. If we can master ourselves, then we're flowing. And I felt that, you know, when you get to the point where you're not so much a slave to, you know, anger, bodily appetites, whatever, then you find I think that's the key to finding real deep peace and true bliss in life is to learn how to master yourself.
Yeah, I like that. That's really good.
Yeah. Terrence, thank you so much for coming on short notice. I appreciate it. It's always a pleasure to have you. You're a good guy, and I see your posts, and you're like a gentle giant. You're just I've seen you, man, on Facebook. You're a cool guy. You're a sweethearted man, and you care a lot. And I love how you write for all the peeps on Quora. What's the name of your space, your Twin Flame space on Quora?
It's a twin flame journey from a man's perspective.
Yeah, I like that because, you know, and I love your heart in that, and I can see all the writings you're doing, and you're there for the people, and you're sharing what you're learning, and I love that. And
I appreciate that.
Yeah, and I love your support too. I love, you know, not only seeing your posts, but, you know, seeing your affirmations of other people's posts and comments, and that's just always encouraging. So thanks for being a caring, encouraging guy. It's great, man. And I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah. All right. Well, that just about does it for us today. Streams of Light podcast. And appreciate everyone who tuned in. And thanks for bearing with us. First day of a different software platform, so getting used to it, but it looks like we made it through. So again, if you're watching us live on YouTube, make sure you go down and subscribe to the channel. And after you've subscribed, then maybe go down to the notifications. Make sure you don't miss any notifications. And that does it for today. Thanks again for joining us. Streams of Light.